This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 372, entitled Masculism 101 for Female Moderates. This is part 2. Continuing straight on. Any moderate woman who reads the above is convinced that on this issue alone things have to change, otherwise we wipe ourselves out. Divorce has been made so toxic for men that young men, especially the quality young men, who are the first to imbibe masculist ideas due to their superior intelligence, refuse to marry. An institution today that truly sucks for men, so is to be avoided, along with paternity. Men have a monopoly over their sperm, so are in a position to boycott paternity by simply refusing to give young women their sperm, thus depriving these young women of becoming mothers, which is something that is driving them crazy. So they are panicking as they become increasingly conscious that the quality men they truly want to mate with, not just hook up with, due to these men's good looks, their intelligence, their status, their earning capacity, their power, etc., are consciously now refusing to give these young women their sperm. They are on a paternity strike. They are giving the finger to the fluffy feminist-dominated divorce courts, telling these monoconscious feminazi bitches, these most hated of feminazis, who control the divorce courts, that they have become indirect genociders, so have to be stopped, with bullets if necessary, because no culture will passively choose to die out without a fight. Masculists, particularly masculist theorists, see the bigger picture than the above divorce court massacre of men at the hands of the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites who want equal rights for women in the parliaments but reject equal obligations on women to fip up by not bothering to get a career-competent education at high school and college, so that women can become financially responsible fips as adults and not expect to be able to parasite off the money of some gullible, naive, childlike, manslavable man who's been so powerfully brainwashed that he believes that his role in life is to be a manslave to a hated fluffy parasite, to work for her Jap salaryman style, while she sits on her fat parasitic ass spending his money that he earns with his 11-hour work days, his 3-hour commutes, handing over his paycheck to her, from which she gives him a pittance and spends the rest on the apartment, her clothes, drinks with her female friends, who are also fluffies, and tennis. Masculist theorists see the bigger picture by seeing the critical importance of the fipping of women. That is, masculist theorists see that their main political goal is the creation of a FIP society, that is, one in which girls are socialized by parents and educated by teachers and professors to be FIPs, so that they do not expect to be fluffy parasites as adults. Masculist theorists are very conscious that the fipping of women and the creation of a FIP society will solve most of men's gender political issues. For example, the greatest form of sexual discrimination that exists today is the lack of the PARER, P-A-R-E-R, equals paternity rejection right, which would be the legislative right of a man to reject a pregnancy unwanted by him. Women have the MARER, M-A-R-E-R, which equals maternity rejection right, but men don't have the PARER. So millions of women commit major gender crimes against men by lying to them about taking the pill, get pregnant, then expect the man to pay for the kid that she wants, that he does not want. This pill lying is a classic example of how women commit gender crimes against men that last decades, because the man is paying for that unwanted kid for decades of his life, which is one of the reasons why masculists claim that women oppress men far worse than vice versa. Women oppress men far worse than men oppress women, because women's oppression of men is continuous, lasting, in capital letters, decades. The legislation of the PARA is to men what getting the vote was for women. With men having the PARA, women will be forced to grow up, to take responsibility for their own lives, to FIP up, to behave as responsible adults by bothering to get a career-competent education that will allow them to become FIPs as adults. In the old Soviet Union, it was compulsory for 11th and 12th graders of both sexes to learn calculus so that they would not be excluded from studying the STEM, science, tech, engineering, math fields and the professions at university. 3/4 of young women in today's advanced countries study what the Masculists call fluffy crap, making them fluffy crappers, choosing to study the soft option, the intellectually easy, intellectually lazy, memory-based majors like English literature, history, languages, etc. at high school instead of math and the sciences. These fluffy crapper high schools then are forced to study more fluffy crap majors at university because they lack the prerequisite STEM majors they should have obtained at high school. So they end up with a fluffy crap diploma, which the economy does not pay well for. So these fluffy crappers then look around for some gullible manslave in her 30s so that he can pay for her to raise her kids in a middle-class house that he pays for. This is the kind of thing that the Masculists are lashing out against the fluffy parasites, calling them manslavers and pointing out that manslavery is slavery, that slavery rouses passions. Slavery is a war issue. Look at the US Civil War, which was largely about slavery. The Masculists are at war against the manslavers, that is the fluffies, and aim to wipe them out, because a fluffy can only be a fluffy if she can get her financial claws into some gullible manslave. But thanks to the Masculist and MGTOW movements, the supply of such gullible, manslavable men is drying up, since there is now an exponentially growing number of Masculists and MGTOWs on the internet, so that millions of men are waking up to not being victims to hated, fluffy, parasite manslavers, and leave such women to rot on the shelf, spat at for being immoral, disgusting, manslaving vermin to be annihilated. Masculists are thus pushing for the creation of a FIP society to free men from manslavery, for the men-fairing of the gender laws in the divorce courts, so that men are prepared to be fathers again. Otherwise, there may be a sex war in which Masculist soldiers simply go out into the street and shoot the feminazi indirect genociders, who have made marriage such a shitty deal for men that millions of men now, 2/3 of them in many countries, and rising, have wiped their hands of marriage and paternity, which obviously cannot continue, otherwise our species wipes itself out. Masculists also aim to correct other errors of the feminists. Many feministed women have moved into the media, becoming TV program producers and company executives, etc. They bring with them their biased, monoconscious view of gender politics and often take revenge on men for the ways these monoconscious feminists feel that men have oppressed women, for example, with men's resistance to giving women the vote, to equal access to the professions, for rape of women, for men's domestic violence against women, etc. Masculists do not deny that men oppress women. You only have to read the feminist books to see the litany of complaints by feminists against men's crimes and attitudes towards women. What these monoconscious women do not know about is how women oppress men, since they have not had their masculist consciousnesses raised. They know nothing about masculism. Most of these women haven't even heard of the very word masculist, and when they do for the first time, they often either ridicule the very idea of the need for a men's lib, or feel an instinctive fear of what angry men might do to women. It's quite common now for men to be portrayed as bumbling fools in TV programs, giving impressionable young boys that women are the superior sex. In primary schools now, and increasingly in high schools, the large majority of the teachers are female, and feminists to boot. These feminist teachers then implicitly and often explicitly push their feminist agenda and visions onto these boys, teaching them that women are the superior sex, that the future belongs to women. Masculists, and particularly masculist scientists, detest these feminist lies because that is what they are. The reality is, as shown clearly by science, as can be seen by anyone who bothers to look into these issues, that men are the genetically superior sex, with average IQs 4 points higher than women's average IQs, with a 10% higher IQ variance. That is, that men's IQ scores are more spread out than women's over a whole population, so that the morons and the genii are males, so that it's not surprising that men have won 99% of science Nobel Prizes and virtually all the math prizes. Women lack genius. Men have 10% larger brains than women, so have 10 billion more neurons in their brains than women, so have 10% more neural processing capacity than women. So it's not surprising that women build nothing, invent nothing, create nothing. The female contribution to world culture is negligible. When masculine scientists hear feminists sprouting their heads off that women are genetically superior to men, these masculist scientists crush them mercilessly, gender politically haranguing them out of the room with a very angry masculist diatribe, giving these monoconscious, misandrous, feminazi bitches a real slap in the face, crushing their female egos by pointing out very forcefully that men are the genetically superior sex, so that little boys can be given their pride in being male back to them. That has been taken away from them by the female teacher-dominated primary and secondary schools, by the female-dominated media, which portrays men as fools who are to be set straight by wiser, smarter women. To masculists, this is ignorant, unscientific, feminazi propaganda that masculist scientists relish crushing due to its middle-class mindlessness, its iscianacy, that is, the inability to think scientifically due to ignorance of science. It's a real shock for monoconscious feminists who are accustomed to half a century of second and third wave feminism, of having had a monopoly over gender political discussion for that time, to be confronted for the first time by a very angry, highly articulate masculist theorist who can beat them at their own gender political game. Since the masculist theorists are male, and hence will dominate anything they turn their minds to, since women cannot compete with men at the top end of the performance scale. Women are simply genetically inferior to men at the top end of just about any performance scale across the board. Masculists want the creation of a FIP society, which means that society needs to be educated into masculist thinking. So masculist ideas need to be spread across the planet, which means that women, who make up half the population, need to be educated into masculist ideas too. The masculists consider the monoconscious, misandrous, male-dumping, feminazi bitches as a lost cause, too bigoted, too one-eyed feminazi to be persuadable by masculist ideas, for them to turn around and become much nicer women, more approachable by men. Since once such women become bi-conscious, they have their feminist anger at men for the ways that men oppress women cancelled by their masculist anger at women for the ways that women oppress men. Monoconscious feminists will probably be the last category of women to be made bi-conscious by the masculists. However, the moderate females, with their more open minds, are much more persuadable by the masculists, so are the first female targets of the masculists to be masculisted, that is, to have their monoconscious feminist consciousnesses expanded to include masculist ideas, so that women play their role in the agenda of the masculists. For example, the men-fairing of the gender laws, the men-fairing of the divorce courts, the legislation of the para, the positive discrimination of higher salaries for male primary school teachers to create a 50-50 gender balance in primary schools, so that boys are boy-faired, etc. The masculists claim that it is in monoconscious feminists' self-interest to become bi-conscious, because bi-conscious women are much more likely to have boyfriends than are monoconscious, misandrous, man-dumping, feminazi bitches who are so obnoxious towards men that men hate them and avoid them like the plague, forcing such harridans, such shrews, to rot on the shelf, utterly ignored and punished by men, thus forcing these women's feminazi bitch genes to be removed from the gene pool, which is the ultimate punishment, that is, genetic extermination. So, I hope this rather longer than usual masculist flyer has persuaded those women who are more moderate than the usual garden variety monoconscious feminazi that the masculists have a real case, especially in the divorce courts, no para, being manslaves to fluffy parasites, etc. We men have the financial power and are the ultimate backup of the law, that is, brute male force. One of the aims of the Masculists is to educate the cops so that they are not brainwashed to take the biased view that the woman is always to be believed, for example, in the case of false rape claims made by women, by accepting that wives murder their husbands at a rate of 3 to 4. That is, for every 4 husbands who murder their wives, there are 3 wives who murder their husbands. The media and society have gone overboard. The feminist pendulum has swung too far, so that masculism is needed to restore the gender political balance. The risk, however, is that men have now become so angry and so hateful towards monoconscious women that there's a very real risk that the gender political pendulum will swing back further than its lowest point, into a new era of what I call the Masculist Inquisition, in which men seek such revenge against the feminazi burnable witches that is precisely what they will do to them. Just how tongue-in-cheek I'm being here will be for future history to judge. I rest my case. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Manslaves to Women, an e-textbook of 370